Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome to another RMA tutorial. Here I'm gonna show you guys some tips on how we can get some really nice cloth textures inside of Redshift and Houdini. We're gonna use a PuffSwagg just for the sake of having some nice geometry of something extremely beautiful. and yeah, let's get started. So the first thing you wanna do is in here. Say for example we don't have anything, right? We only have like whatever geometry you want to have. First thing you want to do is bring a dome, RS dome. So if you hit RS dome, you're gonna get one of those domes that basically lights up the entire thing. What is a dome? For those of you who don't know or are not familiar with what a dome is, for example, this is our PuffSwagg in the center. And this is a dome, which is basically a 3D sphere that maps HDRI, which means high dynamic range image. So it's kind of like a texture of an image that is really large, of an environment that wraps around the sphere and basically lights your object from all of the angles, okay? So to this, I'm gonna do split left and right. I wanna control my parameters here, and we're gonna do light, shader, dome map. Here's where we're gonna add a HDRI, and I've got a bunch of HDRIs in my server. HDRI. I like to use this studio HDRIs, so HDR, and HDRIs you can find anywhere. A good website that I would recommend is HDRI Heaven. Let's see. Here you can find some really nice ones. Polyheaven.com, HDRIs and skies. Alright, so as you can see, we have an HDRI here. Now what I like to do is I like to turn it off on the background, both here on the light, enabling viewport, turns it off. And in shader, we're gonna turn it off in the background, but I'll show you what that is. Like when we open the render view, you're gonna see it in the background. So we're gonna go out. I've got a bunch of textures, you can totally ignore this. But what I'm gonna do is Redshift render brings in this node, and here I'm gonna show you guys kind of like the parameters I use quite often. It's like on the Redshift global illumination, we're gonna set it to brute force because it lights up the cavities a bit better. And if you got motion blur, you can turn it on here. If you guys want to see a tutorial more in depth about like these parameters, just please comment and I'll do that. Anyway, we're gonna leave them as default, and we're gonna do delete everything that I had in here just so, for the sake of like simplicity. Hit H. Brings me in here, open render view, and it's gonna bring in this in. I'm gonna minimize it, put it here, because first we need to set up our texture. So here's the tips that I wanted to give you guys mainly on the texture. So we've got this, I'm gonna have this character as essentially static. So it's frozen now, and what we want to do is UV shade and UV project and UV texture. So these are the two nodes that you need to be aware of when you do like materials that are based on textures, because we need to map a texture onto the character. So with this one, project is basically like a projector that just like projects an image onto the character. And this UV quick shade will show you what it is doing. See? And then you can scale it up and down. Okay, let's bring in a YU texture. Instead of doing a UV quick shade, let's just do like a cloth texture. Let's see, where do I have this texture? So there we go. With this texture, I'm gonna kind of like position it in a way that I like. Could be something like that. Maybe we make it a bit smaller. And then we can go in here on the texture and just see which one we prefer doing. Yeah, this one's cool. So you can use the UV project or you can use the UV texture, and the UV texture will give you different sort of like projection properties that you can use. This is without unwrapping it. We're not gonna go into unwrapping anything. But you can use like polar, cylindrical, rows and columns. It doesn't work for this. Faces doesn't work. But you can see that it'll work for certain objects or others. And with the cloth, see, it'll change. You can change the angle and the scale and a bunch of things here. Polar was looking kind of cool because it kind of like brings it in from the center. So yeah, something like that is cool. So what we want to do is we want to use this texture on our material. So I'm just going to copy the path. I'm going to go into materials. Of course, I have a million materials in here, but what we want to do is RS material and then Redshift material. You connect this one here, and this is our example tutorial. And here we want to do RS texture, connect the texture onto the diffuse and paste what we had copied, which is the path of this texture. And let's get rid of everything else in here. Then we can come back to our object, character, type in material. I want to go into our material. Now it's invisible here, the UV quick shade, and then here we want to turn on tessellation. It's off by default, which is gonna subdivide your geometry so it has more detail and render time. Saving the file, and we're gonna set this displacement to 0.01. We don't have a displacement yet, but just for now, we'll have it in a second. So right now we're gonna see the texture as essentially just a flat texture on our character. Let's visualize from the camera. Actually, change the camera resolution to like something like that. And off the bat, you can see, guys, that like I told you before, we would get an environment back there here, so we can turn it on here. And it's super reflective right now. So we're gonna go into the material. We are going to reduce the reflection and increase the roughness to blur out the reflection, because cloth isn't really that reflective. And then here we are going to remap the scale of our texture, so we can do copy parameter, paste relative reference, so that everything I do to this one affects the other one. And then we want to do like 0.5, actually the other way, so like 2. There we go. So it makes it smaller. We go like 3, even smaller, because the resolution isn't high enough to hold up something smaller, right? And then we want to duplicate this, connect it to the surface, and we want to create ourselves a bump mapping here. So RS color correct. We want this image to be black and white, so we reduce this here, and you can control the gamma and stuff here as well. We want to do an RS bump, connect it here, probably like a 0.01 or something like that, and we can change that in a second. Depends on the scale of your scene. This is gonna make it bump. You can already see it there. That's too much, but that gives it that texture. See the bump. And then we want to do a displacement as well, because it actually displaces the geometry. The bump is just basically faking it. We want to refresh. Might be too strong. Let's see, we bring a little bit of reflection back in. Let's just do a right click actions, create reference, copy, and connect it here. Actually, we can even connect this one here. So when we change the offset, it changes it on both, the diffuse and the displacement. Just want to see if we can get a cooler pattern in there. Yeah, that's pretty cool. My displacement on bump might be a little high. See how much it's pushing it? So we might go down to like 0.1. you want to be careful with your bump and displacement, because if you go too high, then like you start to get like weird stuff. So it's might still be a little high, but I mean it's cool because you get like those moments like that. And then right now it might be too reflective, so I'm gonna reduce the reflection a bit. We could see what happens if we use refraction, though cloth doesn't have refraction. But anyway, this is kind of the gist of it. So just as a bonus, let's just set up a cool camera angle. Just gonna stop the render for a sec. Coming here, camera. We are already in the camera, so let's set up like a nice angle. Something like that or something. Come out of your camera and enter on your viewport and hit C. And then you can bring this in like that to get some Z depth, Redshift depth of field, enable it. Coming here. And hit render. I just want to get a nice angle. Cool. So you got kind of like a cool angle going, and then the last couple tips that I wanted to share with you guys, where if you stay this long, you hit here, coming here, you can change this to linear or OCIO for the color. Then if we go to the LUTs, you can scroll down here and kind of see if you find something that you might think that looks nicer. In my case, I'm happy with the way this is looking. And we can do color correction here as well. See, like, so you can get a really nice in-render result with those parameters. And that's the gist of it, guys. Like, you can also do like a little bit of photographic exposure changes. Here's where you can get blooms. And if you were to use those things, you gotta make sure that in your output, you come here to out and post effects and you turn them on here, or else you'll only see them on the viewport. All right, guys, it's a pleasure Stay updated, stay working. We'll be in touch. Bye.